Good morning. Again, my name is Joanne, and welcome to another episode of Assignments. And it's been a couple of weeks, and today I want us to talk about faith. And when I just thought about the topic, I was like, there's that phrase that, what is faith? Faith is, let me read, is substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. Substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. And that is quite profound. But before we get into faith, I just thought I'd come here and wonder, like anybody who's maybe renewed their journey in terms of reading the Word of God, having their devotional regularly, and really committing time to mine what is in the Word and for it to influence their everyday lives. Like, I wonder, what are your challenges? What are you learning? What is easy? What is hard? Because I think the fact that I come here is, it's a good challenge, because it means that I have to be focused on something which I want to share, and I have to really feel confident about it, meaning I really have to interact with the Word for me, and then for you, I guess. So I think the one thing, maybe the last 2 weeks, I really wanted to share from the book of Job. And then I went, and I think it's because I think twice, because that is how it happens for me. Like sometimes I have the Word in my spirit, or I don't have the Word in my spirit, but I hear from someone else, and then I go and do just a little bit more research, a little bit more reading, a little bit more meditation. I don't have like maybe I should get in time a devotional. I have an idea of what I want to get, but I think I want to just do this general reading, and then I can probably work with the devotional. So I was reading from I'd had one or two people talk about the story of Job, including my pastor, and I was like, all right, maybe I need to go read, and then I can share that. Man, the book of Job is 42 chapters. It's a big book. It's an intense book. It's a hard book. And because it talks about suffering, it's not one of those happy-go-lucky kind of books. So anyway, I started reading it, and then I was like, hey, my speed is very slow, and it's one of those that you can't take like really araka. You have to take it very, very paced. So I'm currently, I think, on chapter 10, a day at a time. So I think when I'm ready and I have the insights, and I'll be ready to share from the book. But today I want to share from faith. It just came to me, and I was like, one of my favorite chapters about faith is Hebrews 11. It's it's a chapter that makes you just go back and think about all these people who are portrayed in the Bible, who had like really immense faith, and faith enough to move mountains, if I could put it in a manner of speaking. So and then the chapter 8, it's the 39 verses, but very relatable, because it touches on stories we already know. So allow me to just like read all of it. I'll just pick out a few places which touch me the most. All right, so reading the Bible like this takes me back to class many years ago, and I used to be a great reader. I don't have the best of voices, and my accent is Kenyanese. But so Hebrews 11, great examples of faith. From 1, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. By faith, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. And it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God will give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going, and even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner, living in the tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead, a nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore, there's no way to count them. All these people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back, but they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeward. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he had prepared a city for them. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his own son Isaac. Even though God had told him, Isaac is a son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life. And in a sense, Abraham did not receive his son back from the dead. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings to the future for his sons Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. It was by faith that people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though it was dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days and the walls came crashing down. It was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of faith of Gideon, of Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God has promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts, mountains, hiding in caves and holes on the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. Yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. I feel like the ending ends on a very, confusing note. Yeah, confusing note. Like, all these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. Yeah, like they had faith of things hoped for, and it was evidence of things not seen. And some of them never actually saw what was promised, but the promise beyond them came to pass. It's quite something, I'd say. So, like, definitely I'm going to pick out on specific parts of that chapter which really resonate. And I think one of the highlights for many years actually has been the story of Enoch. The fact that Enoch never died, that he walked, actually it says there he walked, he was taken to heaven because he pleased God to that extent. And I believe, okay, I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe there's no one else who experienced this privilege. And when you think about it, Enoch is not also one of those people who's talked about so much in the Bible. If you could compare, no offense, to someone like, say, David. Yet, God spotlighted him and was like, for you won't go back to earth like the rest of us. You'll come back to heaven with me. And yeah. So I think, like, for him, that was such an honor. Like, I kind of wonder what kind of life he led to gain such favor from God. And just to say that I think sometimes we have to think of ourselves special as Enoch was, as we live our lives, as we seek God and yearn to please him. Like, there is an example of a man who, gained favor because he pleased God. So yeah, Enoch is one of the highlights of me reading this chapter. And then obviously the other highlight is Abraham. And this past week I hanged out with a couple of people, and it's not that we were doing Bible study, but at some point we talked about Abraham, and I think in the two contexts it's Abraham's obedience which really comes out. Like, when you think about Abraham, like, to some extent you can be like, hey, honey, maybe he was gullible, naive, because the things he was being told to do, like, if it was me, or even not just me, any regular person, like, the doubt, kwanza, the bit about, like, you're being promised you'll be blessed through Isaac, and you're supposed to sacrifice the same Isaac. It doesn't make sense. And I feel like that very part doesn't make sense. When it comes to faith, it shouldn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense because whatever God has put in your heart, and promised you and spoken to you, and you've heard from Him, it's prudent to trust it. It's prudent to just listen to it and understand it. And maybe you might not understand the full context because it will not be unveiled even the way you're imagining or the way you're understanding it, because we serve a very, we are not supposed to know God in His entirety. It's not our place. So faith calls for us just obeying. And for you to obey, you have to listen. And for you to listen, you have to discern. And for you to discern, you have to be still to allow whatever God is saying in your life, for you to hear those words. Otherwise, utakuwa tu hapo unakimbizana na town, just chasing whatever in Nairobi, but not hearing not pausing long enough to hear what God is saying. So yeah, Abraham, I think very, very interesting. I think then the other part, I think from our conversation is, I think one of my friends was like, Yani, Abraham had this relationship with God, and then he had, as a husband, let's say, it came to a point where his relationship with God was so close, and like I feel like it made him glow. Like there was a glow up in Abraham, up to the point where Sarah called him my Lord. And when I think about Sarah, I always, I'm a storyteller, so I visualize some of these people, and I imagine like she was a bit of a, what is the word? I don't think she was like mpole, or I think she was quite feisty because of all the things that she did. Like, when they went out and she lied that Abraham was a brother. And I know like they'd agreed to do that, but to confidently lie about that, you have to have a very interesting character. And also the debacle with Hagar, I think also that was, like it makes you like turn and be like, all right, Sarah was an interesting, feisty kind of woman, but to get to the point where like she is, I'm using this word very loosely, submissive enough to be like calling the husband my Lord, it means that she had seen the glory that God had placed upon Abraham. And yeah, that's a beautiful thing to see that in a partner and to honor that. Yeah, so I think the last person I'm going to maybe mention kidogo is Rahab. And I think when I read this chapter and I got to Rahab, I finished, and then later, I think maybe later in the day, I went and looked for the story of the spies and what Rahab did, and knowing that she was a foreigner, and when this man of God came, her faith came to the surface, and she knew that they were a sent of God, and she could she could do what she needed to do to help them out, because she knew it would help. She's human, like she's looking out for herself. Like she was like, let me help this man of God, and whatever happens to this city, I can fight for myself and for my family. Like I have a card to play. And when you go back and read about that story, actually it could make a very nice short film. Like, yeah, it's very visual. It's very nice. Like, yeah, like it makes Rahab was a very smart, like, let's start from the fact that, yes, she was a prostitute, but she was very smart. She was witty. She was a negotiator. She saw, like, both continuums of a situation. She was perceptive. Because, at the end, when she'd hidden the spies and they successfully left, like, she got negotiated for herself and for her family. She was like, when the city is destroyed, you need to preserve me because I've done this. And these spies were like, this is what we are going to do. You're going to put like a rope outside, a scarlet rope outside your house, and when we see it, we'll know you and your people are in there, and we won't destroy that house, and you will be preserved, you will be saved. So, and now I come back and I'm like, a lot of emphasis is on that story, and it comes back to the New Testament through Hebrew, and it doesn't hide the fact that Rahab was a prostitute, like, yet God used her despite her history or backstory, for lack of a better word. And I think that's the thing about life, that when it comes to the things of God, like, who are we to judge? Who are we to sneer? Who are we to be like, why is God using that person? Why not? And I think the thing I used to hear from way back, that, God qualifies the disqualified, and he, interestingly, their testimonies are stronger, and their evangelical journey, like, it's easy for them to pull people to Christ because of what they've gone through and come the other side. And I think, I don't know, probably that's why God uses these people. But also more, it says that we are all sinners with fallen short. We may not be like Rahab, we are not maybe prostitutes, but we are sinners in our own special ways, in our own secret ways, in our own personal ways, in ways sometimes we don't even realize in our everyday life. So we need to come back with some humility that we are not, quote unquote, all that. So yeah, so I think those three people, Enoch, Abraham, Rahab, like, really kind of encourage me about faith and its different contexts. And I think I wanted to mention that faith comes from hearing, and hearing the word of God. And the more you spend time with God, the more you hear what he has for you, what he's saying for you, and what he wants you to do. And sometimes it's not super direct. I feel like, yes, you can hear God, but also you can hear him through other people. And he keeps on confirming the word that he is speaking to you. So I think the thing is, reinforce your faith through reading the word, reinforce your faith by praying, reinforce your faith by having time with God and staying close to God, so that you can hear what instructions he's giving you and promises he's giving you. So yeah, so that's it from me. Have a lovely, lovely day. Peace.